welcome officially to Candlelight Yin. A little bit of extra light. It's been really cloudy and kind of dark and cave-like all day, so it's put me in this mood to do a kind of cave-like opening. Now, if you've got some pillows or some blankets or other things, you can use these to sort of build up a structure of support, but you can go pretty simple. So, you know, if you have a yoga block, cool. Not everybody has yoga blocks, but you can build up a little stack of pillows. Like, one of the things that Yin kind of gives us an opportunity to do is we can actually use our arms or our hands to kind of help support us. So you can build like a little structure and then let your forehead kind of rest, right? So just having enough props around you. This could even be, frankly, a Tupperware container. Like, as long as you got the lid on and it's sturdy, you could use that as a prop to kind of lean your elbows into. Now, I've got a veritable mountain of props here, so I'm just going to rely on what I got. But you may want a little bit of support under your knees. I'm going to use a rolled up blanket, and then I'm going to just fold forward and figure out where my elbows go and put support under them. So we're going to start with this butterfly shape. Now, in the Yin world, we name the poses different things. The original intention of that idea, I think, was to prevent us from kind of bringing rules from other practices into the Yin world, because Yin is done with very relaxed muscle. And so if we don't call it bound angle pose, then maybe we don't do all of those like really strong muscular actions. So instead, this is a much softer practice, and we're going for a lengthening through the tissue in the back. So we're going to let the back round. Now, when you let your back round, it's best not to be aggressive, because the muscles that live in this part of the back are quite sensitive. And mostly what we're talking about is like the ends of the latissimus dorsi muscles, the quadratus lumborum muscles. These are not big, thick muscle. Like, when you get your lat up to this part of your body, way up here by the shoulder, it rolls over in itself and gets thicker. But down here at your waist, it's quite a thin and mostly connective tissue layer. Same is true of the trapezius, like the lower trapezius muscles, and these little quadratus lumborum muscles that live kind of between the hips and the ribs. They're not super thick, ropey muscles. They're relatively thin sheets of muscle, and then the connective tissue around them is what we're after. So we want the poses to be done with a sort of gentleness. You know, we're going in, so I want to feel something. So when I get into this forward bend, I want to feel a lengthening in my back, maybe some lengthening here in the inner thigh, because a little bit, you know, little inner thigh, a little hip action. Some people will feel it in their outer hips and not the inner part of the hip. So we want to feel something with Yin, but we're not going for sensations that feel any sort of burning or heat, and anything that feels like your foot, like something's falling asleep. Numbness and tingling. If it's really just kind of a mild, light sensation, I don't know if that's as big a problem, but if your body goes numb, you definitely want to switch it up, okay? So you're kind of finding your way based on what you discover. And then so you go right to the point where you feel something, right? Just to that point, don't go farther than that. That's the beginning, that's the edge. And then as we hold the pose, if the tissue starts to let go, then you go further into the shape to once again find the edge of sensation. So if it comes to a place where you don't feel it anymore, it's okay to try and go a little further. The issue here is that if you are hypermobile and you have a huge range of motion in your body, you may get to a point, I know people who can put their chest and their forehead on the floor in this pose, right? And so you would have to dig a hole and go past your legs to get to a place where you might stop moving. So if that's the case, don't go that far. Just go to a point and stop, and instead your practice becomes focus on the breath, focus on the meditation aspect of how the body shifts with the breath, and that's your practice, right on? So if you have tight tissue, this is a practice maybe of sensation, and if you're quite loosey-goosey and very mobile, this is a practice of meditation. And it's meditation for everybody, but like that would be kind of the primary places maybe to direct your attention. So we'll stay for a few more minutes. We'll stay for about 30 more seconds. Just check in with where you are. Take a big breath. We're going to roll ourselves up, and then we're going to straighten out the legs. And you can take your hands and sort of help you guide those together a little bit if you like. Sometimes I find that nice because that tissue's been stretched for quite a while. And for me, like I can feel that kind of shape that my back was in. It wants to kind of hold that shape. So I might sit up a little taller and rock the front of my pelvis forward a little bit to change that shape a little. And then notice the signals that the body is sending your conscious awareness, right? Are there signals that feel, if something feels sore or tender, or you get a kind of ouchy discomfort, those are signals that indicate, for me anyway, that we went past the edge, not to the edge, right? So this is how we learn where the edge is and how to surf it. And then in terms of other kinds of sensations, like if there are pleasant sensations of lightness or ease, or just, a pleasant warmth sometimes happens to me when I do some poses here, then those are sensations that I generally find pleasing. And so I chalk those up to cool, that worked out. And then allow myself to use that as kind of a barometer of, yeah, that's a pretty good spot. Like that edge was pretty good for me, okay? So we're gonna do a wide angle position. Same idea, we're gonna fold forward. Now, this one gets a little different because for some folks, a larger percentage of folks, when the legs go straight and wide, the body doesn't want to go forward, it wants to go backward. And that's just a genetic situation in the shape of the acetabulum and the placement of the femur in the acetabulum, which, by the way, is a depression in your pelvis where your femur bone fits. But in any case, sounds sexier than it is. But in any way, what you can do is a couple of different things. You can bring the legs a little closer so they're wide, but not super wide, right on? Because you're still going to get something happening there. The other option would be to bend the knees quite a bit. And I like to put like a pillow under each knee or something along that line, so that there's a little bit more of, when you fold forward, there's just a little bit less tug on the various parts of the pelvis. You might be able to get the pelvis to come forward. The other option, if you happen to be somewhere in a position where you could put your butt up against a wall or even up against your couch, and then take the legs out wide and kind of rest them either on the wall or on the edges of, like on the couch cushions or whatever, you could do it that way. So you can lay down on your back, bring your legs out into a big wide V, and let them rest on a surface. So if you have that near enough to you that would work out for you, awesome. I do not. I mean, I could probably rest my legs on the credenza, but rather than do that, and this is a comfortable position for me, so it's not an issue for me personally, but I do like the one on the wall. So you can certainly do that. And if it were me, I would use my couch. So I would lay on the floor with my hips as close to the couch as I could get within reason, and then just let the feet kind of hang out on the edge, like up against this arm and up over there as far as it'll go. And then just see how it works. And if it's not for you, it's not for you. All right. So you can join me with this shape in whatever version of this makes the most sense to you. I generally like to start a little bit on the higher upside and then kind of work my way down. So start out with just like, I don't know, what I perceive as a 45-degree angle. How's that? And then ultimately, sometimes I can get to a place where the tissue around my inner thigh and my back gets soft and friendly enough that I can lower down to the elbows resting on one prop. And this is one where I like to rest my forehead in my palms, because it does sort of give me the opportunity to have my neck be slightly more neutral. You can even sort of allow the crown of the head to sort of rest in your hands a little bit if the forehead's a little uncomfortable, just so that you have a little bit more space that you're making here. And then sometimes I'll even do more like my chin resting on my arms. And as long as that doesn't feel crummy in the back of your neck, that's also an opportunity. And it doesn't mean you have to stay perfectly statically still. But what we do want to do is notice, like, is the movement that I'm doing to help relieve tension from my body? Or am I doing movement because I'm feeling fidgety and nervous? So if you're feeling fidgety and nervous, can you bring your awareness to your breath and to a kind of like elongation of the exhale to help yourself unwind a bit and be willing to stay present with these deeper, longer shapes? Or if the movement is a little bit more about, oh yeah, there's a little bit like I'm holding stress in my neck or in the soles of my feet. Like for me, sometimes it feels really nice to just occasionally do a little side-to-side wobble, because it helps remind me to keep the tension out of my neck and out of my low back, okay? So you decide how it works best for you. Just be conscious, that's the main thing. It feels interesting to me to shift my attention a little bit and just kind of like slightly lean to the right or to the left and spend a handful, maybe 5 to 10 breaths with that slight change. You could even sort of fold over one leg really if you'd like. I'm just gonna make it more of a little teeny tiny shift so that I'm feeling a slight change on one side. It got pretty comfy. So this just gives me that little bit of extra to kind of find the edge again. gonna stay for about another minute here. That helps you kind of time things out for yourself. All right, so we're gonna take a nice big breath. And float yourself all the way up. You're gonna lean back a little bit. We're gonna bend the knees. Oh, okay. So then pick your legs up. And you can use your hands for help, but you can also kind of just pick them up and bring them into the middle. And that gives us a little bit of support for those poor little inner thighs. Now, one of the interesting things about the inner thigh area in terms of connective tissue is that the fascia that lives right under the skin in this area is also the home of two big acupuncture meridians, the kidneys and the liver. And so I like to do this little qigong exercise. I'm doing this a little bit more, like they do this thing where they barely touch the skin and you just sort of pat, 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 pat. I call it fluffing. But I like to do just a little bit of a tap. So just to kind of hit all that tissue. Just go up and down, up and down, up and down a few times. And then if you try that, just see where it leaves you with. And for me, it leaves me with this kind of really interesting sort of slightly buzzy sensation. I mean, really gentle. It's very mild. I use bigger words than a lot of the sensation that I'm really feeling. It's very, very mild. But it's interesting. I mean, yeah, it's there for me. All right, yogis, we're gonna take a minute or so. And we're gonna transition into a lunge. So I'm gonna do some cow shapes because my back still wants to be rounded. And I could use a little transition. I'm also gonna put a folded blanket down so that my knees have a slightly softer surface even though I'm on a carpet with a little bit of a mat. A little blanket is nice. And I'm gonna make sure that I've got some props to support me. So you can use blocks or pillows or anything that sort of gives you something that you can rest elbows or hands or whatever you might like on. Okay, so we'll get all of that goody stuff done. And then we'll join up. Now, when you use a blanket, it's a good idea to iron out the wrinkles because there's a little hidden wrinkle in your blanket. You're gonna feel that on your knee. So take the time just to make sure that your props are nice and smooth, and that'll help. You'll feel better later if you've taken the time to get that done. Really, any kind of yoga blankets, any kind of blankets will work for yoga. That's what I was trying to get to. You don't have to have special yoga blankets. I have some of those, but I also have blankets that I bought, traveling. Little Mexican blankets that you can buy at a lot of gas stations and stuff like that as you travel across America. And then I have some blankets that I'm a big fan of that are a little closer to a quilt. So you could use any blanket that sort of works for you. Even a quilt will work. Now, I'm not rushing you, but when you get to a place where you're ready for a lunge can go anywhere from the hip being right over the knee to the hip almost touched on the floor, right on. There's a big range of territory. And for some of us, just stacking the hip pretty much right over the knee, you're gonna feel something on the front of your hip, on the leg that's on the bottom, okay? The farther you go out, maybe you drop a knee open, that sort of thing, then we might get into feeling sensations in the hip socket of the leg that's in front. But we're going for whatever sensation we get, but you want to make sure that it's a sensation that feels kind of appropriate. Now, this tissue in the front here of the hip is mostly connective tissue. So it's not going to be easily bullied into some sort of submission. You're going to have to coax it. You got to woo connective tissue, yogis. So again, this is this concept of the edge, okay? So once you've joined me here, we're going to get into a place where it feels like we've got a sense of stretch at the beginning here. And I like to lean on something. This just provides me an armrest, so I lean one elbow on my thigh. And I've got this big tall pillow made special for yoga that I bought because I'm fancy. But in any case, I'll hook you up with where I bought it if you want to know after. But in any case, I have no affiliation with these people. I just am their customer because I think they have reasonable prices and they're local. So that makes me happy. But in any case, I like having like a stability, right? A sense of stability. So even with yin, we're still going for these qualities of asana, stable asana, and asana that makes us feel a sense of well-being or ease, or feels like it makes us feel good, feels sweet. The root word of the word that's used in the Yoga Sutra is, the two words is asanam sthiram sukham. So poses or taking a seat should feel steady, and then the word sukham is usually translated as easy. But that's not exactly the root, right? It's a root of a bunch of other words. One of the words is succor, or to nourish. And another of the words is sugar, which is sweetness, right? And then, like, the way I think about it is more like to provide a sense of well-being with the body. So you can think about it any way you like, but kind of toss those ideas around your head. And if your poses bring to you a sense of well-being, then what does that feel like when you're doing a practice like this, where we're kind of being a little bit on the edge of things, you know? Now things are starting to settle for me, so I'm just going to make a couple little minor changes to the way I'm aligned here. Move my foot a little bit. And this is about halfway for what we're doing tonight. And so I am inclined to get a little closer to the ground because I have room and I've spent some time there to really let myself kind of soften in. But you can stay right where you are. You don't have to go anywhere else. So following along at your own risk, essentially, is what I'm suggesting. Now when I get down this low, there's different places that I feel. So now this becomes a story about this hip because I've lowered my torso past this point. This hip still has some spiciness to it, but not nearly as much because it's being supported. yogis. We're going to take a really big breath. We're going to let go with a really big, and then we're going to back this whole pose up. So I'm going to move very slow, right on. And once I get back to the point where my front leg is mostly straight, and now what I'm feeling is some stretchiness in the back of this thigh, I'm going to stay for a minute. So we're just going to pause right there for a bit. Take a couple deep breaths. Now we're going to go into the half saddle. To get to the half saddle, we're essentially just going to sit down. Now you can come all the way out of this pose and then come into it. I've put this pillow here. If I had a folded up blanket, that would also work, or even a yoga block, okay? So we're just going to sit down. You can sit right on the floor if you're a little bit more mobile in your body. Okay. So for me, this is helpful because my heel doesn't easily touch my hip. If your heel easily comes up to your hip and even snuggles in beside it, you won't really need anything necessarily under your other hip. You can decide how you want to arrange that. Okay, so this is the first part, which is if you can sit down with a sense of equanimity, no pain in your knee, and pause, okay? So in the regular yoga world, this would be called Ardha Virasana, or half hero pose. In the yin world, this is called the half saddle pose. You know, just to make it easy for you to remember things. So you can decide what name to use, really. It does not matter to me. Some people teach yin and use just the Sanskrit names, and some people use the yin names, so that's up to you. Now, possibility exists that you can lower down onto your back by laying all the way back. For me, I already feel a little spiciness, so I don't need to lay back yet. What I am going to do is put just a little bit of support behind me, and eventually, as we go along here, it might feel nice for me to lower down to an elbow. It depends on me and this plant and how we're going to get along. But in any case, you might be able to lower all the way back, given your space. Your knee can go out to the side or come to the front, but if the knee comes off the ground, it's a really good idea to go ahead and put some support under the knee so that it has something to lay on. And if it's the top of your ankle that's troubled, put your shin on a blanket so that the top of the ankle kind of starts to hang off the edge of the blanket, and that will give you a little bit more, support so that there's a little build up to your ankle's natural curve. Right on? Okay, yogis. So me and my friend here, the plant, are gonna work this out, and we're gonna stay for a bit. We'll see what happens. We'll just take breaths and notice, like, usually for me, the initial sensation here is quite spicy. It doesn't take very long before it starts to get a little softer, a little easier to be around. Leaning myself a little bit to my right, just because my knee wants to roll that way, so I'm letting my hip follow the knee into this shape. Hung out with this pose for about half the amount of time we're going to hang out with it. So you want to check in with yourself from here till the end. And if you realize at a point where you have just had enough of this pose, it's okay to come out. Especially if you're relatively new to these longer practices, it's okay to start out with a little bit less time. And what I would do is I would, roll to my side and unwind my leg, and then just lay on your back for a little bit. If you want to come out a little early, I'm going to do that when I get out of here anyway. But just to let yourself have a few moments to relax and experience how the pose landed you. These spicier poses, the ones that are a little saltier, might not need to be doing them as long initially, right? You kind of build up a tolerance. And for me, the first 3 minutes are the amount of time it takes before I feel any really deep release. And so a little bit longer is where it works best for me. Somewhere in the 4 to 5 minute range is just about perfect. But that may or may not be true for you. So we're inside of our last minute here, if that helps you make a decision. Take a couple deep breaths. Now, if you're laying all the way on your back, take a really big inhale, and with your exhale, you're going to squeeze your legs together quite tight, and then you can either come up to get out, or you can roll all the way to the long leg side. I like to lean to the long leg side until it's easy for me to unwind the leg, so that I don't drag my foot on the floor. That makes it a little bit less tricky for my knee. Okay? So if I drag my foot on the floor, sometimes I accidentally catch too much drag and pull on the knee in a funky way. And the knee has been under quite a bit of pressure with that pose. Now, for my personal experience, that pose is a good one for me to practice because it is challenging. It's one of the most challenging poses that I practice. But how do you know? Well, you know based on how it feels, right? So does it feel lighter, more at ease? Is there a pleasant sensation? Or when you come out of a pose, does it feel heavy, painful, whatever? So if you've got heavy, painful sensations, I would definitely think twice about doing that pose the same way. Next time, you might look for an alternative. Now here's the way you look for alternatives. Sometimes I remember to tell you. And then sometimes, look at the shape the pose is making with your body, right? Just kind of picture it in your mind, and then rotate it 180 degrees or 90 degrees, because you could do poses different. And then as we come into the swan, this is a good way to think about the swan, okay? So the swan can be quite spicy for a lot of people. We're gonna take this leg that was stretched out in front of us, we're gonna bend that knee, and then we're gonna swing the leg that was bent back behind us. And some of us may decide to do our swan with a little bit more of kind of a bent legged situation. Some people may decide to straighten that leg all the way out, and for me it helps to actually elevate the pelvis up on something, a folded blanket, a pillow, whatever I happen to have nearby and handy. That one happens to be handy, so I'm gonna go with this guy. And then having the pelvis elevated puts the weight of the pose in a more evenly distributed way for me, and it works a little better for my bones and my joints. But you may need to do this pose differently. So this shape may not work. But if you take this shape and flip it onto its back, right? You flip this upside down 180 degrees, then what you're doing is you're laying on your back, you're holding your leg close to your chest, and you're letting the other leg rest on the floor. And that's an alternative way to do this pose, okay? You can also come up with some other options, like you can put your foot on the ground and rest your leg up on top of the other leg, and that'll get you in the same territory in terms of the muscle area and the fascia area, and the places where muscles overlap is what we're really after. So please do the poses according to your own body's needs and not according to anything I demonstrate on your screen we're going to pause here for a few moments. So if it's comfortable enough to just kind of relax, you can do that. Or you can stay a little bit more propped up. Here. So the question you ask yourself is that enough? Or is there any change I want to make to my pose to add support or take some away? Could I become more aware of the breath? Sometimes I daydream while I'm doing this, and it helps to kind of remind myself, oh yeah, let me pay attention to my breath. Left with our shape, a little bit more than that, but pretty close. Just noticing those things. I'm going to do a little tiny bit of a change and just prop myself up a little higher for my last 30 seconds. I can really focus on a deep breath. Yogis, we're going to kind of lean to our bent leg hip. We're going to bring our back leg around. And then we're going to pause for a second and just let the body move a little bit. Oh. I'm going to unwind this leg, but I'm doing it slow. Okay. Now, we're going to lie down for about 2 minutes and just see how things feel. We've done one side, we haven't done the other on a bunch of different shapes. So let's take a moment to just kind of give ourselves a little bit of a check-in there, and then we'll do our other side. Alrighty. So I'm just gonna let myself stretch all the way out. And I like sometimes taking these little moments to to check in. We've done a bunch of stuff on one side. Now, when I do this, at least right now, I would swear to you that one side of my body feels like it's been kind of pulled out like taffy. And the other side of my body does not. It feels a little more compact. So that's interesting in and of itself. And then sort of notice the overall quality of what it feels like to be present in the moment that you're in right now. Kind of hitting this breath as it comes along. Does that breath go down nice and deep into your body? Does it tend to kind of linger closer to the chest? One of the ways that we can help kind of work with feelings of disconnect or feelings of anxiety is to lengthen out the exhale. So let the inhale use the whole diaphragm if you can, and then just without straining or really trying too hard, just see if you can let the exhale sort of luxuriate on its way out. So it's not in any kind of hurry. Now, if you start to feel like you're choking, or like anything short of breath, anything like that, don't breathe like that. That's too much. Back off a little bit. You never want to breathe with like the force of a rhinoceros snorting. It's always a much more gentle approach. I mean, there might be instances where that would be appropriate, but not generally, and not for calming the nervous system. So my initial feelings of like there being a really strong difference have started to soften. So I'm ready to do my second side, and hopefully you guys are willing to come along with me on this idea. Although Shavasana position is feeling kind of good, so I'm looking forward to getting back to it. So I'm going to put my left leg forward this time because I had my right leg forward last time. Right on. And I'm going to turn around so that I think it's a little easier on the camera end of things to see what I'm doing if I'm more open to you guys. So I'm just going to flip myself around one time. Okay. Now, left leg is forward and the right leg is back. And I'm going to do the same thing. So I'm going to, just kind of start with my hip pretty much over my knee, kind of find my way into kind of feeling like I'm pointing forward for the most part, and then sort of ease in. Don't go too far. Just like, ooh, I feel something right there, so I'm going to pause. Then as time goes on, I can go forward more, or I might just stay right there for the whole time. Right on. And it didn't take that long for me to stop feeling that sensation, so I'm just going to ease a tiny bit more forward. It's nice. Been here for a little over a minute or so, and just feeling this, this little ease forward. It's kind of nice.
hip says yes to my venturing a little bit further forward here. So far, so good. We'll see how this continues. You can explore your own kind of shifts up. Maybe you just do a different version of the lunge where you put one hand on your thigh, or you add a little twist to it. There's lots of kind of ways to sort of vary. You can go just down to your hands, or come all the way up high. So just little variations can make it a little bit more interesting. Not necessarily spicier, but just a little more interesting. So I got about 30 seconds left. So we're going to take a really big breath. And then we're going to slowly, ever so slowly back up from there. And again, we're going to fold over this leg in the front here for a minute. Just to give our hamstrings a little love. It should feel like love, yogis. And not like punishment. So if it's punishment, back off. Bend your knee a little bit. Shouldn't be punishment. So I'm going to settle myself all the way back. Oh, I'm going to lean a little bit more this way. Oh, there it is. Okay. And then, then I can begin to think about whether I'm going to lay all the way back or not tonight. Okay. So you're going to find your way in. And again, with the half saddle, the top of the thigh is what we're aiming after, but if your knee feels like it's in trouble or something like that, then this may not be the right way. So you can modify it with blankets and other things, or you can flip this thing sideways, hold your foot, or flip it onto your belly and hold your foot. Those are two different ways to approach the same kind of shape that might be better for your particular anatomy or current circumstances. To sort of make sure the hip and the knee are sort of working at the same angle with each other. So just work that out with yourself.
attention to the sensation that's kind of developing or developing might be the wrong word for it. It's kind of evolving, probably a better word. Kind of over the top of my thigh, making sure that it doesn't ever start to feel like it's too spicy or dangerous. But yeah, the danger of these kind of longer, slower shapes is that we sort of start to mind trip. We've got 1 more minute here, by the way. So, kind of finding your way into the shape and then staying present with it, I think, is the biggest challenge, maybe. And if it's too pushy, one of the potential side effects of being too far, past the edge, is that your mind will try to distract you from what's going on, right? Your body will kind of shut down the communication. So if that's kind of feeling what's happening, like you can't really, your mind's everywhere and it's hard to pay attention to your body, then you might back off a little bit and see if you can reestablish that connection. Nice big breath. I'm going to let go with a really big, and again, you can either roll to your side or come up and then come out by rolling, getting that leg free of any restriction, and then coming on out there. Oh. And before I go on to the swan, I'm going to let that one rinse itself out a little bit. Yogis, we're gonna may have included too many props. We're gonna go into our swan. So that leg that was straight out in front is gonna become the leg that is the bent leg. And then the leg that was bent is gonna become the leg that's straight or mostly straight behind us, okay? Making adjustments using props and pillows and soft things so that you get just the right amount of support for yourself. Hopefully, it's feeling pretty good to be coming into these shapes. This is one of my favorite sequences. I love this particular sequence of starting with a couple of forward bends. And then these last 3 poses that we're doing on each side have more of a back bending quality, although not necessarily extremely so. Depends on how you do them. But that sort of balance of sort of inward, introspective, and a little bit more expressive back bend. It feels nice. It feels like a nice kind of harmonious refreshment for my soul and my body. It feels refreshing to me to have that combo. See what it feels like to you. Because maybe this is not your jam and you find some other ways of organizing your poses.
helps you make any decisions about how you may want to proceed forward. Or backward or sideways for that matter. We're going to take another 30 seconds here. So take a big breath. Oh, we're going to bring our back leg around. And then we're going to take a moment and give everything a little rinse. We'll end tonight's class with a twist and then Shavasana. So I'm going to use a blanket for my twist. I'm going to wind up with this pillow for Shavasana in a moment. Okay. So everything else I'm going to kind of set off to the side. Hopefully you'll still be able to see everything if I'm careful with how I do all this crazy nonsense. Okay. So I'm going to keep a blanket as kind of a headrest. And the way I'm going to do this blanket is I'm going to fold it. So it's about that size. Now, it's folded 3 times, okay? I'm going to put the folded edge where my shoulder goes and leave these loose edges up above my head, because in a little bit, it's going to become fun. So I'll show you how to make a head pod. So we're going to put the blanket up top and smooth it out. And then I'm going to lay down on the floor and get myself to the point where just my head is on that blanket. Now, this other blanket that I've got is what I'm going to let my legs rest over. So, this is a monster blanket, but that's the one. So when you're ready, you're going to bring your legs up, and then you can either put your feet on the ground, pick your hips up, and twist that way. I like to just kind of let my legs fall over. And I'm also a fan of kind of taking the top leg and draping it around, because I get a little bit more spice on the side of this hip and a little bit of a stretch through my chest muscle, and I am a fan. So those are areas that get tight for me, so I like having that space. So we'll stay for about 2 minutes on each side, which is about half the time we spent in some of those other poses. But still, it's a good long time. Let yourself relax. I like to turn my head usually with the legs. Occasionally I like that deeper twist in the neck, and I'll turn my head and look the other way, so that's up to you. I usually go for softer here at the end of the practice. It might be a little spicier if this happened at the beginning. breaths where we are. Now I'm going to start with this top leg, so I'm going to bring it back and then let the other one follow it. Oh. I'm going to switch spots with my blanket. And you can just let your legs rest on the floor. I just like having a soft surface because this part of the hip can be a little on the bony side. So it feels nice to let it flop onto something soft. So when you're ready, you can do the opposite side. Oh. We'll stay for a couple of minutes here. If you need a little extra time, take the extra time. You don't have to rush. We're not going anywhere. Take a really big breath. We're going to bring this top leg back. Oh. Now if you like something under your legs, you can put something underneath, a blanket or pillow, whatever you like. I'm going to use this giant pillow. And then I'm going to show you how to do a head pod. Now, this is really nice if you want to make it really dark and really quiet, right? So if there's a little bit of extraneous noise around at your house. So what you do is you take the blanket and kind of cup it around the back of your skull and then set your head down. Now, we're going to come back to that. Peel the top layer of your blanket off, follow all the way around, and then you're going to tuck it in around the sides of your neck, okay? So you take the top layer, peel it up, and then tuck it in around your neck, okay? And then you just keep going all the way around, just tuck this blanket in all the way around your head. Now, if you're claustrophobic, this is not going to be for you, but if that's not a problem for you, then this is kind of nice. Then you're going to take the second section of this blanket, and you're going to pull that over the top, and that becomes kind of like your little eye cover, and then just tuck it around so it stays put. Now, I still have one whole section of blanket I didn't use, but I used the top 2 layers. So you can use as much of or as little as you want. I don't really need a lot of warmth right now, but I like this darkness right on. And a little bit of ear compression cuts out a little bit of the sound. So it makes my life a little bit more relaxed. So then adjust yourself so that you're relaxed. And we'll just stay for a bit and let the poses settle in. You want to go jump into bed and finish your Shavasana that way, you could. stay for the remainder of your night, you could. It's not a bad spot to take a nap in. But if you're still here with me, and you're in the mood to close off class together, we'll do it all together. So, I've unpotted my head. I'm gonna take a big stretch. Oh, bring my knees in, give myself a little back massage. It's good to hug your favorite yogi every day and give yourself a back massage. And then, after rolling to my side, I'm gonna bring myself up to a seated position. Oh. Now. Thank you for coming out for a little candlelight yin. Hopefully it was just the right kind of wind down for your day. Let's take a nice big breath together. Big inhale. And a big sigh. Namaste, yogis.